Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Mothering Sunday, which we've seen on Remembrance Sunday. Which is actually not that inappropriate considering the film is set in 1924 and the war dead from World War I is a thread
Throughout the film.
But one of many. I wasn't really looking forward to this. It really looked like ITV period drama, a lot of, the Eddie Izzard thing of a lot of people walking into rooms and saying, hello. But it was directed by Eva Husson, who's a French lady, and I thought maybe that would be interesting, like a French, we always talk about English people who go over and make movies in America and the kind of impact of English people, the English outlook on American cinema, and I thought it might be interesting if there was some, relationship between what the French kind of outlook on the English is. But
well, it was much more visually interesting than you would expect a British heritage film to be, really.
I really agree with that. And by the end of the film, I was really enjoying it. I actually found it very moving. How about you?
There are many things that I loved about it. I really loved the sensuality of the film. I mean, and by that, I don't necessarily mean the sex scenes, though those were a pleasure. But I mean, the sun on the girl's face and her hair streaming, and then these close-ups of, cloth, and it's a film that's very sensuous, very tactile in a way.
It's quite lusty, actually.
Yes,
too. And the other thing I think maybe the Frenchness, if you like, brought to it is less of an emphasis on dialogue. I expected it to be wordy and talky, and there are long stretches where it's just action against music and kind of pure filmmaking in that sense, which I really enjoyed.
It's so interesting to see a woman director doing this, because there are long stretches where Jane's body is the focus of a whole scene, right? And she walks naked through the whole house, and yet it never feels fetishized. So the combination, I mean, the attitude towards the female body, and indeed the attitude towards the male body is so different, than what you're used to seeing. It's kind of you really see the gender of the director as a factor. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily determining, but as a factor in kind of how you're seeing what you're seeing, which I really appreciated. I really enjoyed all of that. I must say, there was moments I misread the film, or it misdirected me, or I was expecting something that didn't happen, which for me, I thought the love affair was going to be discovered. And throughout her walk in the deserted house naked. Yeah,
you totally think
she's going to be caught.
Happened upon.
Yeah, and actually that was like a MacGuffin.
Sure.
Because it's it keeps your tension up, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and then of course nothing happens, right? So I thought that was like really clever, and really interestingly desexualized. Like kind of. I mean, obviously, anybody who isn't dead is looking at those bodies and is having a reaction to those bodies, but the film doesn't fetishize them.
The nudity really reminded me of Shoplifters, which was the Japanese film we saw about that kind of constructed family of shoplifters, because it had that moments between the quote-unquote mother and father of the family where they sleep together, and then afterwards they're just lying together and they're naked, and there was something, so it really captured that feeling of liberation and freedom that you get being casually naked with someone who is also casually naked, and this has that. And also when she goes walking through the house on her own, again, the feeling of liberation that I got out of her just exploring this mansion that's nothing to do with her. She's new there, or maybe not new there, but certainly she's exploring it, and she's just naked, and it's not like she owns the place. There's no feeling of that, like I'm showing off that I'm the naked person in this house. She just is naked in this house. It kind of feels natural and casual, and I really enjoyed it.
Before we continue, we should tell the plot.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So, the film is primarily set on Mothering Sunday, Mother's Day, in 1924, March the 30th. But it has a framing device about the main character, Jane, writing this novel, or becoming a novelist. And it engages in kind of flashback and it's not exactly non-chronological storytelling, but it does jump into previous parts of the story and bring them to the fore at times. I think done very elegantly, and it really works. And you understand where you are, I think. So she's this maid for a kind of landed gentry family in the home counties somewhere. The house is run by Colin Firth and Olivia Colman. And Colin Firth and Olivia Colman are going off to Henley with another couple of families for Mother's Day, dinner by the river. Jane, with the data herself, goes off with Paul Sheringham, who is the son of one of the landed gentry families nearby, who should be at Henley today, but instead is spending the day with Jane. Illicitly, no one knows they're together, and indeed he's supposed to be getting married to the daughter of one of these other families, who is, during the course of the day, getting more and more pissed off that he's not there. I mean, I don't want to say too much more than that in just setting up the pacing. That's the idea of the story, right?
Yeah.
Early on, I was really thinking, this is so ITV, and I mean that. Whenever I say ITV, I always mean that in the most derogatory way you can possibly imagine. Particularly when the phone rings at the house at the start, and she picks it up, and it's Paul saying, "Meet up with me," and she tells Colin Firth it was a wrong number, and he says, "A wrong number on Sunday? Good heavens!" And I thought, what, really? I thought, Jesus, this is what it's going to be like. Fortunately, it wasn't. Although when she goes round to Paul and he opens the door, it does show that again in flashback, as if you've forgotten it from 4 minutes ago, which I thought was quite insulting. Again, luckily, it did no more of that, and actually, to some extent, became quite elliptical in some storytelling.
Yeah, it is. It actually is very elliptical. And there are things that I liked about it and things that I didn't like about it. I mean, I liked those out-of-focus moments where, you feel that you're within the realm of memory, and of a lack of clarity and of things not being understood. I actually thought that this was a fantastic showcase for the best of British acting, which is kind of really understated and ironic, and always at least, having the potential for more than one meaning. And at the same time, with a weight of emotion that is instantly understood. I thought Olivia Colman and Colin Firth were both superb at doing that. And actually the interplay between them, was, I thought, quite wonderful. I loved all those dialogue scenes, at the table. Yeah.
I thought they became superb. Kind of early on, especially with Olivia Colman, I was thinking, what are you doing in this film? Because her character is very dispossessed, kind of dead to the world. And as the film goes on, you learn that she's lost
all her children
to the war. So that's a very good reason for her being that way. But it's when at the dinner table they've been waiting for Paul to arrive, and Colin Firth has, he's very aware of how depressed his wife is and how awkward this day is being because Paul's not there and everyone's waiting. And Emma, his betrothed, is getting more and more angry. So he's very keenly aware of that, but he tries to kind of talk past it and give this toast, and that's when Olivia Colman explodes. They're not here, no one's here. And I thought, wow, it's just come alive. And she was the one, well, Jane as well, but she was the one who started to make me feel moved, very sad. Actually, what a remarkable achievement to make me feel sad for the landed gentry. But I really did. And that moment when she says to Jane how lucky she is to be an orphan because she's been bereaved at the start of her life and has nothing else to lose, is not true. She can lose people and she can be bereaved, and we see it. But you understand why she says that, and you feel it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I was trying to make out what the film was saying about class because, in a way, the affair between the maid and the scion of the landed gentry is impossible because there's all this weight of expectations on him, right? And they both accept that it's impossible and they're just having fun, even though, they really like each other. And I thought at the end, when she marries a black man, right, that there would be some kind of parallel choice. Yeah, that she's now in a particular position of power by virtue of race. And I thought there would be some kind of moral dilemma about her choice and so on that might parallel, her different position at the beginning of the film. But if there was, I didn't see it.
No, actually, it really puts them on a level, almost, if you look at it in kind of identity terms. By she being a woman and he being a black man, it's like neither of them is a white man. So for the film, at least kind of in principle, they exist on this same level.
Well, but I don't think that's true.
No, nor do I. But that's how the film, I think, constructs it ultimately.
Well, I think the film makes him a philosopher and
educated,
educated and so on. Yeah, whereas she's working in a shop, so I think the class element is meant to compensate a little bit for that. But nonetheless, there is a real social power differential, in a racist culture that I think is really not addressed and certainly not paralleled, to her earlier situation in a way that I think the film would have been more interesting had it tried to do so.
Yeah, it's only hinted at. There's that line where Jane says to Donald, his name is, so-and-so doesn't like you. And he says, yeah, they don't like men like me. Which is clearly hinting at his race. But that is the closest the film gets to addressing that at all.
Yeah.
And it does feel like an illusion.
Yes. I was particularly irritated by the presence of Glenda Jackson, whom, I love. I thought the concluding statement about prices was just like so bloody awkward. So when she appears basically in two scenes, one in a kind of flash forward scene, or maybe the film's present where you just see her face reflected in a mirror overlooking a garden. And I thought, oh, how wonderful, right? Because she's got such an extraordinary face. She looks like a real person, of her age, right? She clearly has never had any work done at all. And there's something just extraordinary about her face, right? But then when she makes the last speech at the end, I thought it was terrible, actually. And really self-conscious,
So the idea is that Glenda Jackson you don't see for most of the film. To the point where when she comes back, oh yeah, Glenda Jackson was in this at the start. She is the old Jane in roughly the 80s. And there's press at her doorstep. She lives in some kind of modest terrace home somewhere. And she clearly is some kind of superstar author at this point. You've been told she's going to write this great novel, all the men in her life die, and that's what she does. And she's clearly winning like a Nobel Prize for Literature, some huge prize. And she vaguely rubbishes it. She says, I've got water, they're in the attic upstairs. And she says it with a kind of a smirk and an irony and attachment, because she asked the journalist, have I disappointed you? But
that scene is terrible. Oh no, you could never disappoint us. It was terrible.
Wasn't there some author who did that when she won a Booker Prize or something? And
I've heard Iris Murdoch did something similar.
Right. It's probably drawing on that,
but still, I mean, I thought that was just icky. But most of the film is not, right?
I mean, it really could have actually done without Glenda Jackson, either at the start or end.
Yeah.
I think. It was okay just being the story of Odessa Young as Jane.
Yes.
I found it extremely moving. I think it has a really kind of legible feel for grief and loss.
Yes.
And how it hits people.
Yes. And the thing is that the whole film, in a way, is about loss. Right, like, everyone in the film is in pain. Their families have been, like, completely rent asunder, by World War One. I mean, there's something about the juxtaposition of that with, this Bildungsroman about a young girl becoming a writer that actually doesn't sit very comfortably with me, I kind of, and yet the film is built around that, right?
It's the story of how she becomes
a writer, and there are 3 reasons for it, right? Or 3 moments of it, and the last one's a secret, right?
That framing for you is too contrived.
Yeah,
I would agree that the film, again, can do without it.
Yeah.
Actually, just the story of her and Paul and that day, that was such an impactful day in her life.
Yes.
It is strong enough on its own that the film doesn't need to force this extra thing. I mean, and it's not to say that it shouldn't have her becoming a writer and that sort of thing, but it does feel a little insistent on it.
Well, You know, I thought the film didn't know when to end, right? Because I thought the introduction of her husband, right, was something that, I mean, in itself it's interesting, but actually the film doesn't treat it very interestingly, yeah? And then you think, well, that'll end there, right? Like, yeah, he dies, right? And, you know, they have the conversation in bed, yeah? And that's a spur, you know, to something else. You know, and then there's the Glenda Jackson thing. And then there's the flashback again, you know, to the past. I just thought the film didn't really know when to end.
Yeah, after Donald dies, it does take a little bit of time. But I must say that the sort of 20 or 30 minutes up until his death, I thought were where the film was at its most interesting. When it came alive, it started to really bring life to certainly that central theme of grief and loss. I mean, again, that was also when, well, basically that's when Paul dies.
Yes.
And so that's when Colin Firth is made kind of emotionally active at that point, in a sense. You know, he's really distressed by it.
He's wonderful.
And that's quite interesting to see, because he's someone he's a character who is kind of holding on to, he's kind of trying to hold his household and his wife together, essentially, and he's doing it constantly, just about, and then this really kind of tears into him, and he has trouble. I thought he was wonderful, actually. I thought it's a really subtle thing to do, kind of to cross that line.
He's great.
To just stay on either side of it.
He's great, and the film is very much about that. I think it may be in a way that we haven't quite yet talked about, you know, because it is also about the repression of emotion, you know, when it's all right to feel, or the masks that people have to put on, yeah, to be social, what can and cannot be said in public, yeah, feelings that have to be kept, like, hidden, yes, and, you know, roles that people have to perform, yeah, and kind of, you know, what society allows overtly, and what can be done, yeah, in secret. I mean, all of those things are kind of, you know, very English in a way, I think. Yeah, and the film kind of is really quite wonderful with them, actually. The only person who you feel expresses her emotions freely is, you know, the young maid, and probably she only does so because, as the Olivia Cole character says, she's not too bright, right? Yeah. So, you know, because if she were, she wouldn't. Yeah, the kind of, you know, there's a place for things, and sometimes things out of place can also be very dangerous. So I think the film conveys all of that. I think, you know, very cleverly. The dining room scene where she's serving, yeah, and she's serving the person she's fucking, yeah, is all full of little kind of knowing glances, things overheard, yeah.
Yeah, that introduction to that scene where it's playing the Vivaldi over it is built out of one look that leads to another, and everyone's looking at someone and knowing something about someone or not knowing it. Thought that was really interesting, kind of set piece, if you like.
Yes.
It's not showy, but it's every shot in that is meaningful, read along with the others.
Yes. So it's the work of a real filmmaker, for sure.
It's also shown in a non-standard aspect ratio. At least it seemed clear to me. It's not full frame, but it's not wide enough for even TV widescreen 16:9. It looked to me like 14:9, which is halfway. Which is a ratio I'm only familiar with because you used to get, I don't think you still do, on like UK Gold, back when it was UK Gold and not Dave. They used to show kind of old episodes of Never Mind the Buzzcocks or whatever it might be. And because those were in full frame from the 90s, but people were starting to have widescreen TVs, they would crop the top and bottom just enough for you to be able to show a bit more of the image horizontally, but not completely widescreen. You wouldn't cut off that much, so you end up with this middle 14:9 ratio. And I've got downloaded episodes of Never Mind the Buzzcocks that are in that ratio because they're recorded off UK Gold. Look like that. And initially I thought, I mean, uncharitably at the start, I was thinking, well, they're just doing this because if they did it in complete widescreen, you wouldn't be able to tell that you're not watching ITV. But then I thought, no, it's actually very beautiful. The image, the shots of the landscape are absolutely gorgeous, and the way they naturally it's just fantastic. And the way it works in close-up and the kind of portraiture aspect, I really, really found appealing, because you do get a complete, beautiful close-up shot of someone's face, but with just enough space on either side that it's not like they're isolated, but you get this feeling of the background. I thought it worked really, really nicely.
It's a film that knows how to deal with the visual. So, for example, that image of something burning, which may be a car, which, you're told is a car, but you don't see the car burning, you see something burning, right? And it's in the middle of this beautiful, lush, green,
wooded area.
But then you see like something burning and, with charred ground, around it. I mean, it's kind of like almost like a metaphor for the film, kind of, i.e. in these green, healthy, manicured, looked after, lush landscape. There's something kind of, both that burns, that is felt more strongly or more powerfully and so on, and nonetheless also charred, and on its way to being dead, to kind of
with just this like hole in the landscape, and you see that shot from above, and it's just this anomaly on the right of the screen, and it comes back as well when Donald dies, and there's a bit of a montage, and that shows up too, and it's like, despite the fact that this is long after Paul's death, which is what the car crash is, it's ever present, and like it tonally fits, you cut straight to it because it's right there.
Yes.
And it doesn't.
What's very interesting is one of the last images in the film, and one of the last phrases, is when he says, look at this is all frosted over now, but I want you to imagine it this way, sunny, green, So even there's that thing of, something that is both frozen, and at the same time, can be revivified in imagination. There's a connection of imagery, I mean, I see a connection between that dichotomy and the charred, burning car in this lush green forest. There's kind of, it leads to interesting kind of resonances. So, it's a film that surprised me, and that I'm really glad I saw it. I expected it to be, one of those like lovely shot kind of heritage films that, are slightly dull and middle class. But actually, it really exceeded my expectations.
I agree with all of that. And it's better than ITV.
Right. All right, so thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.